The fall wasn't a stumble. It was a shove. Hard. Fast. Final. Celeste Morain hit the bottom of the marble staircase with a sickening crack. Blood bloomed against white tile. A scream echoed. Not hers. Then silence. In the shadows above, Corinne Vandrell stood stiff, eyes narrowed. Harold stepped back, breathless. She did it to herself, he muttered. No one will believe her, Corinne said coldly. Especially not when we're done with her. Celeste's eyes fluttered. She heard every word. 3 weeks later, the city of Sonoralis forgot her. Or tried to. The news said she was recovering. The whispers said she'd lost her mind. Her husband, Damien Vandrell, had died in a strange accident not long before. And now his widow, gone, vanished. In mourning or madness. Corinne and Harold played the grieving in-laws with polished poise. They filed for emergency custody of Noel. They told the court Celeste was unstable, a danger to the boy, a woman unraveling under grief. They told a story. They didn't expect her to tell her own. The first sign came quietly. Judge Thorne received a sealed envelope. Inside, 1 USB drive, 1 typed letter. No signature. Just a request. Allow this to be seen. It speaks for itself. The day of the preliminary hearing, Terraview County Courthouse was a hive. Press, socialites, politicians, all buzzing with the same question. Why had the Vandrells been summoned? And who was daring enough to challenge them? Celeste arrived alone. No announcement. No grand entrance. She wore black slacks, a clean white blouse. Simple. Intentional. Calm. But her eyes, they held fire. She walked past gasps. Past judges who once dined with the Vandrells. Past teachers from her school whispering. She came back. She took her seat beside Leora Penn. The civil rights attorney barely nodded. Behind them, Darian Holt leaned on the courtroom wall, silent, watching. Harold turned. His smile faltered. Corinne narrowed her eyes. Your Honor, their attorney, Grant Darren, began, rising smoothly. My clients seek temporary custody of young Noel Vandrell. His mother, Miss Morain, has exhibited troubling behavior, disappearances, erratic conduct, since the tragic passing of her husband. For the child's welfare, we urge immediate action. He held out thick files, evaluations, medical reports, statements from witnesses attesting to her emotional instability. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. Judge Thorne barely glanced up. He turned to Leora. Ms. Penn, your response? Leora stood slowly, her voice calm, cutting. Your Honor, we will respond. But first, we request that the court view a short video. Grant scoffed. This is a custody hearing, not a cinema. Judge Thorne frowned. Leora said nothing more. She handed over the drive. A murmur rippled. Thorne sighed. Very well. Let's see it. The lights dimmed. The screen dropped. The first frame froze the room. Harold Vandrell, at the top of the grand staircase. His hand, shoving Celeste. Gasps. Then Corinne's voice. Cold. Clear. Take this woman and her stain of a child out of our lives. Permanently. The video rolled on. Conversations. Whispered in rooms they thought private. Corinne saying, Noel belongs to us. She was never meant to stay. Harold's reply. We'll fix the will. Like Damien would have wanted. Then came the reports. Screenshots of falsified psych evaluations. One of them, signed the same day Celeste was in the hospital. In a coma. A date mismatch. A forged signature. The final blow, a voice. Noel. On a hospital couch, quiet but firm. I saw Grandpa push Mommy. Grandma said Mommy didn't deserve to live. When the lights returned, the courtroom was no longer a place of order. It was a furnace. Corinne turned red. Harold went pale. Grant Darren dropped his pen. Celeste sat unmoving, hands folded, watching. Judge Thorne's voice broke the silence. Do you have a response, Mr. Darren? Darren stood slowly. I need a moment to confer. But then another door opened. A woman entered. Gray coat. Hand steady. Adelina Torres. Once head housekeeper at the Vandrell estate. Fired. Quietly. 2 years ago. I saw what happened, she said. And I have more. Behind her, 2 former staff members. Security. Groundskeeping. They nodded. I kept backups, Adelina added, in case I ever needed to tell the truth. It happened fast. Harold shouted. Corinne demanded a delay. Called the footage fake. Judge Thorne ordered silence. Bailiffs approached. And just like that, the Vandrells, once untouchable, were led away in handcuffs. Flashbulbs erupted. People screamed. Some cheered. Celeste remained seated. Leora placed a hand on her arm. Darian met her gaze from across the room. A war had started. And this was only the first shot. Outside the courthouse, news anchors shouted into cameras. Shocking revelation. Years of alleged cover-up. What really happened to Damien Vandrell? Inside, the DA requested emergency warrants. Detectives questioned Grant Darren, who sat pale-faced, asking for immunity. He gave them everything. Emails, hidden accounts, and a confession. Damien planned to change the will, Grant admitted. He was leaving everything to Celeste and Noel. Harold and Corinne knew. He never had that accident. They made it look like one. That night, Celeste sat on a balcony overlooking the glowing sprawl of Sonoralis. Wind warm against her face. Noel asleep inside. Safe. Finally, Darian approached, carrying tea. "You could have run," he said. "I almost did. But you didn't." She didn't reply. Instead, she looked at the phone in her hand. Messages pouring in. Reporters. Activists. Victims. "You started something," Darian said. "I had to," she replied. "For Noel. For Damien. For every woman they silenced." She opened a file on her phone. Photos. Letters. More evidence. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Darian nodded. "No. It's only just begun." The next morning, news of the Vandrell arrest splashed across screens across the city. But another story had just begun to emerge. Celeste received a call. It wasn't from the DA. Not from the media. It was from inside Terraview Hospital. A nurse. "I think you need to see something," the woman said. "There's a file that doesn't match the timeline of Damien's death." Celeste's breath stopped. "What file?" There was a drug in his system. Undocumented. It wasn't supposed to be there. The nurse hesitated. "And there's more. The signature on his discharge order. It wasn't his." Celeste ended the call. Turned slowly. Leora stood at the doorway, expression unreadable. "You heard?" "I did." Darian appeared beside them. "If they killed Damien," he said, "we need to prove it." Celeste's hands clenched. "I'm not stopping now." Leora nodded. "Then we go deeper." Outside, the press waited for a statement. Inside, files were pulled, calls were made, questions whispered behind closed doors. The Vandrell dynasty hadn't just tried to erase Celeste. They'd erased others, covered more, and somewhere in the shadows of Sonoralis, someone else still held secrets. Watching, waiting. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life, displaying the damning footage. Harold Vandrell pushing Celeste Morain down the grand staircase of their estate. Gasps echoed as Corinne's voice played, dripping with contempt. The evidence was irrefutable. Judge Griffin's gavel struck, signaling the arrest of the Vandrells. Celeste stood tall, her gaze unwavering. Outside, the sun blazed over Sonoralis, but a storm had broken within its elite circles. The once untouchable Vandrell dynasty was crumbling. Reporters swarmed, capturing every moment. Celeste, flanked by her allies, Leora Penn and Darian Holt, made her way through the crowd, determination etched on her face. Back at the newly established support center, formerly the Vandrell mansion, Celeste watched as her son, Noel, played freely, his laughter a balm to her wounds. The transformation of the estate mirrored her own journey, from victim to victor. But as she turned to discuss future plans with Leora and Darian, a courier approached, handing her a sealed envelope. Celeste opened it, revealing a letter from Corinne, filled with venomous accusations and denial. She sighed, folding it carefully. "Some people choose to drown in their hatred," she murmured. Darian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And some rise above it." Celeste nodded, her resolve strengthening. The battle was over, but the war for justice had just begun. If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. The silence in the courtroom was unreal. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that wraps around your throat. Celeste didn't move. Neither did Corinne Vandrell. Harold was stiff in his seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. All eyes were fixed on the back of the courtroom, where Adelina Torres had just stood up. Not just her, two others beside her. Faces people hadn't seen in years. Ezra Kwan, groundskeeper, Lena Morrow, house manager. The three of them had been gone. Silenced. Paid off. Or so the Vandrells had thought. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder. And Adelina's voice was steady. "I was there," she said. Celeste's breath caught. Adelina continued. "I saw Mr. Vandrell shove her. I heard what Mrs. Vandrell said afterward. And I kept quiet for too long." The courtroom erupted. Voices. Gasps. The judge banged the gavel. "Order." But there was no putting this back in the box. Leora stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, "we'd like to call Miss Torres as our first witness." Harold rose abruptly. "They're lying. This is fabricated." He turned to Corinne. She didn't look at him. Not even once. She was frozen. Stone still. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Adelina walked to the stand. Step by step. Not a tremble. Not this time. Celeste watched, heart pounding. 2 years ago, she'd nearly died on those stairs. Today, her truth was finally walking into the light. Leora's questioning was sharp. Precise. Adelina didn't hesitate. "I heard them talking," she said. "About Celeste. About Noel. About getting custody, permanently. They called her a liability. Said Damien had been weak. There it was. Damien. The name still burned. Celeste hadn't spoken it aloud in weeks. Adelina's eyes flicked toward her. "She didn't fall," she said. "She was pushed. By Harold." "And after the fall?" Leora asked. "They left her there. On the marble. Bleeding." Corinne said, "Let her lie in it." Leora handed the judge a transcript. "Your Honor, these match the audio clips already entered into evidence." The judge flipped through the pages, then nodded grimly. Then Ezra Kwan took the stand, followed by Lena Morrow. Each backed the story. Each added more. More lies. More forged papers. The nurse who changed reports? Paid off. The email from the psychologist? Written by Corinne herself. Each revelation hit like thunder. By the time Leora sat down, Corinne's lawyer, Grant Darren, was pale and silent. For the first time in years, the Vandrell name wasn't being whispered with reverence. It was being dragged across the coals, and it was only the beginning. After court adjourned for the day, Celeste stepped out into the hallway. She didn't speak. Neither did Leora. Not at first. But Darian Holt was waiting near the doors. He looked at her like she was something carved from steel. "You all right?" he asked quietly. Celeste nodded once, then said the thing none of them had dared to speak aloud until now. "If they did this to me, what really happened to Damien?" Leora stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "I was just thinking the same thing," she said. Darian nodded grimly. "I'll dig." Quietly. He left. Celeste looked down the hallway. Corinne stood at the far end, still surrounded by her team. But something had cracked behind her eyes. The Queen of Sonoralis no longer looked untouchable. She looked hunted. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed even louder. Word had spread. The Vandrells were exposed. But as Leora reviewed their next moves, her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen, then blinked. Celeste leaned in. "What is it?" Leora turned the phone around. A name. One no one expected. Jess O'Rourke, Damien's former assistant. "She's requesting to speak. Privately." Celeste's mouth went dry. "What does she want?" Leora's voice dropped. "She says Damien's death wasn't natural. They met Jessa in a parking garage beneath an old office building. Neutral ground. Jessa looked different. Thin. Nervous. Eyes darting. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said. "But I saw things. I heard things." Leora stepped forward. "Then help us understand." Jessa glanced over her shoulder, then spoke fast. "Damien was scared before he died. He told me he'd found something. Something buried in the family trust." Celeste's heart kicked up. "What kind of something?" she asked. "Files. Payments. To clinics. Institutions. Gag orders." He said they were hiding something big. Something about what happened to his older brother. Celeste froze. "Damien had a brother?" Jessa nodded. "A twin. Died at 8. Drowned. Or so the story goes. Damien never believed it." Silence. Not just from Celeste. From Leora too. Jessa looked at them both. "He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to someone outside the family." She pulled a flash drive from her coat. "Damien didn't die in his sleep," she whispered. "He was poisoned." The next hour blurred. They watched the files in Leora's office. Photos. Medical records. Journal entries. Video clips of Damien talking to a private investigator. His voice was low. Tired. I think my parents killed Rowan. I think they're capable of anything." Celeste's breath shook. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. Leora sat back. "They killed their own child." "They killed Damien too," Celeste said. Her voice had no tremble, only fire. "They tried to kill me, and now they want Noelle." Darian walked in, having read the same files on his tablet. "This goes deeper than just greed. They're hiding decades of crimes." Leora nodded. "And now we can prove it." Celeste stared out the window, past the rooftops of Sonoralis, toward the estate, the place she had nearly died, the place Noelle had once called home. "I want them stripped of everything," she said. "Their power, their legacy, their name." Leora met her gaze. "We'll need one more thing." "What?" "Someone from inside their financial world. Someone who knows how they move the money, who they paid off." Darian nodded. "I have someone, but it'll take a risk." "Do it," Celeste said. Leora's eyes flicked to the window. "Then let's bring the entire Vandrell empire to its knees." At the next court hearing, Leora filed a motion to reopen Damien Vandrell's death as a suspicious case. The judge, skeptical at first, reviewed the new materials in chambers, then agreed. The announcement was made just before recess. The courtroom was stunned. Corinne dropped her glass. It shattered at her feet. Harold went pale. Celeste didn't blink. Leora whispered, "Now it begins." But just as court was about to resume, a deputy entered the courtroom. He handed the judge a sealed envelope. The judge read it, then looked up, stunned. "Ms. Washington," he said, addressing Leora, "do you have someone named Darian Holt on your team?" "Yes, Your Honor. He was just taken into custody." "What?" Celeste snapped, rising. "For obstruction of justice. Filed by the Vandrell legal team." Corinne smiled. For the first time in days. But Celeste wasn't shaken. She leaned toward Leora. "If they're arresting him, it means he's close." Leora nodded, and whispered something colder than steel. "Then we're even closer." The drive to the police station was quick. Celeste's fists clenched the entire time. When they arrived, Darian was in an interview room, bruised, but smirking. The officer handed over a bag. Inside, a small journal, leather-bound, worn, Damien's initials on the cover. It was real. Darian leaned forward. "Found it in a lockbox registered to a false name. Hidden in a trust vault." "What's in it?" Celeste whispered. He didn't answer. He just slid the journal open. The first line was scrawled in Damien's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I didn't die by accident." Celeste didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pages, each one darker than the last. Secrets, confessions, proof, names of politicians, judges, doctors, all tied to the Vandrells, all part of the web, all complicit. One line made her drop the book. "They offered me a choice. Stay silent or Noelle disappears next." The pages blurred. Her pulse raced. A shadow moved outside her window. Celeste jumped to her feet, pulled the curtain. Nothing. But she knew. This wasn't over. This wasn't even close. At dawn, Leora called. "There's a problem," she said. Celeste grabbed her keys. "Tell me." "The evidence file we gave the court yesterday. It's gone." "What?" "The court clerk says it was never entered." Celeste felt her stomach turn. "They're cleaning up." Leora's voice dropped. "We're running out of time." A message buzzed on Celeste's phone. Unknown number. Just a video. She hit play. It showed Noelle. At school. On the playground. And a silver car idling at the corner. Celeste's chest locked up. Another message followed. Just one line. "We warned you." If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. A hush gripped the courtroom. Adelina Torres stood at the center. Her voice had just shattered the illusion that held the Vandrell dynasty together. The judge hadn't moved. The bailiffs hadn't blinked. Celeste could hear her own heart pounding. "Your Honor," Adelina repeated, her voice steady. "That video is real. I was there the night Harold pushed Celeste. I saw it with my own eyes." Two more witnesses stood behind her. Men who had once served drinks at lavish parties. Who had once opened the gates to the estate. Now they stood for truth. Now they were done being silent. Judge Tenley finally spoke. "Ms. Torres, step forward. State your full name for the record." As Adelina gave her testimony, Celeste glanced at Corinne. The woman looked carved from ice. Harold shifted in his seat, trembling. Their attorney, Grant Darren, whispered something in their ears. Too late. Leora leaned over and whispered to Celeste, "This is it. The moment we break the seal." And then came the sound, heavy doors opening. Uniforms. Flashing badges. 2 detectives entered. Corinne Vandrell. Harold Vandrell. "You are under arrest for assault, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder." The words fell like bricks. Corinne stood. "This is absurd. Fabricated. That footage. We have corroborating statements. Signed and sworn. We've seen enough." Harold tried to speak, but choked on his own breath. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Reporters surged forward. Corinne screamed as cuffs snapped around her wrists. Harold dropped his cane. It clattered on the polished floor like a gunshot. They were let out. Celeste didn't move. She couldn't. Everything was crashing and rebuilding. Judge Tenley banged the gavel. "We will recess for further review. The custody petition is denied. The court will issue immediate protection orders for Ms. Morain and her son." Gasps filled the courtroom. Celeste could barely stand. Leora caught her elbow. "It's not over," Leora said. But it started. And it had. The Vandrells were behind bars. But the headlines didn't stop there. 3 weeks later, the Vandrells' arrest opened a floodgate. A second wave of charges rolled in: financial fraud, bribery, evidence tampering. Investigators swarmed their former estate, uncovering rooms filled with old files and hidden drives. But the most disturbing find came from a locked drawer in Damien's old study. It was Darian who discovered it, a sealed flash drive labeled with a single word: Will. Celeste held it in trembling hands. They played it together. The video opened with Damien, months before his death, sitting at his desk. "If you're watching this, then something happened." He looked tired, hollowed out. "I don't trust them anymore. My parents. They've changed. Or maybe they always were this way." He paused, took a breath. "I've rewritten my will. I left it with a third-party notary, someone who owes me a favor. Noelle stays with Celeste. She's the only one who ever stood by me." His voice cracked. "And if I end up dead, it wasn't an accident." Then, he stared straight into the lens. "They won't stop unless someone forces them to." The screen went black. Celeste dropped the flash drive. Leora didn't speak. Darian didn't move. It wasn't just abuse. It was murder. And Damien had known. 1 month later, a new trial was opened. Now for conspiracy to commit murder. Grant Darren, cornered by his own paper trail, agreed to a full confession in exchange for reduced sentencing. He delivered names, details, corruption that ran through judges, real estate deals, medical cover-ups. Even Judge Tenley came under review. Celeste became more than a survivor. She became the center of a legal storm that swept through Sonoralis. People started talking about buried scandals, about powerful families that had silenced women, erased voices, and bought their way through the system. Not anymore. 2 years later, the Vandrell estate had changed. Gone were the marble lion statues, the velvet drapes, the paintings of silent ancestors. The gate now bore a new name in bold brass letters: the Morain Center for Justice. Inside, women sat in classrooms. Children read in quiet corners. Legal aid flowed to those who had been denied it for too long. Celeste walked the halls in a tailored navy blazer. Her voice carried authority, but her presence held warmth. Volunteers greeted her with respect. Survivors held her hand. Leora ran workshops in the East Wing. Darian handled outreach in 3 counties. Adelina, now director of operations, smiled at every woman who crossed the threshold. And Noelle was thriving. At 10, he spoke in complete sentences about social equity. He joined chess tournaments, built science projects, made friends who knew nothing of the Vandrell name. He was no heir to empire. He was the son of a woman who'd rewritten the rules. Corinne Vandrell. 3 years into her sentence, she hadn't spoken to another inmate voluntarily. Her walls were covered with old articles. The delusion remained. She insisted she'd been framed, that someone had edited the footage, that Damien's death was an accident. No one listened anymore. Harold Vandrell. The man had aged a decade behind bars. Weakened. Forgotten. His name no longer opened doors. Only cell doors. Grant Darren. He now lectured at a university court-ordered. His class was called Ethics and the Edge. Every semester, he opened with the same words: "I defended monsters, until the monsters turned on me." Back at the center, Celeste stood before a class of future lawyers. Young, eager, hungry for change. She told them everything. Not just about the trial, but about the fear, the silence, the moment she almost gave up, then the moment she chose not to. Justice, she said, is not just about verdicts. It's about refusing to disappear. They applauded, but it wasn't about applause. It was about remembering. That power built on silence can be undone by one voice. That truth, when revealed, doesn't just break systems. It builds new ones. Later that night, Darian joined her in the courtyard. The city lights shimmered beyond the walls. Noel laughed somewhere nearby. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't stopped on that road?" he asked. She looked at him. "You didn't just stop. You stood." He smiled. "And you? You rose." A wind stirred the trees. Somewhere, a woman entered the center's doors for the first time. Celeste turned. "I want her to feel what I didn't feel that night I was left at the bottom of those stairs." "Safe." "No," she said. "Seen. A new dawn. They say revenge is sweet." But Celeste Morain never sought revenge. She sought truth. And from that truth, she forged something stronger than victory. Legacy. Because when the system fails you, you build a new one. When they try to erase you, you write your name in history. And when they try to bury you in silence, you answer with a voice that never stops echoing.